Israel is preparing for a massive campaign on all fronts amidst fears that this war could be expanding. This includes an increase in kinetic activity in Lebanon, Gaza, Judea and Samaria, and more. Meanwhile, the full results of Israel's preemptive strike on Hezbollah 2 weeks ago is coming to light, following a weekend that saw heavy fire exchanged on Israel's northern border. A large shipment of Iranian-produced missiles arrived in Russia, promoting Ukraine to issue a strong warning to Tehran. Also, a secret instruction document from the mind of Hamas's terrorist chief Sinwar has been published, allowing a glimpse into the cruel game played on the feelings of the Israeli public. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 338th day of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and all its terrorist proxies in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. We start our report with some bad news on the negotiations front, as Hamas has made several new demands for things it wants in return for Israel's remaining hostages. This includes a large increase in the number of Palestinian security prisoners to be released from Israeli jails. In other words, despite being utterly defeated on the battlefield, they are looking for ways to claim some kinds of victory in this war that they started. As a result, the United States compromise proposal is stuck for now, and Israel's political security establishment has come to the conclusion that the chances of a 6-week ceasefire, which was supposed to start the first phase of the American proposed deal, is very unlikely at this point. The working assumption now is that there will be no future hostages released in the near future, and the fighting will continue on all fronts for a very long time. This includes the northern border, which we'll talk about more in a minute. But it also includes the increasingly intense security operations in Judea and Samaria. It goes without saying that it is impossible to detail the action plans that were discussed by the War Cabinet and the security chiefs on Thursday evening. In any case, these plans have not yet been finalized and will have to be adjusted in reaction to the events going forward. However, some preliminary outlines can already be seen. It is becoming clear that the underground tunnel network that Hamas built underneath Gaza using cement, electrical wires, pipes, and other materials that were meant to build housing for civilians is almost completely unusable at this point. Many tunnels have been demolished, and many more have had their water and electricity lines cut. So the terrorists have largely abandoned them and moved above ground, hiding among the civilian population of the Gaza Strip. This ushers in the next phase of the war, in which the IDF will shift its focus to preventing attempts by Hamas to move large forces back into the northern sector, attack the IDF positions along the Netzer corridor, and prevent smuggling of fresh supplies of weapons and ammunition into the Strip through the Philadelphia corridor. In fact, the goal of the offensive operation is to prevent a situation where the IDF is in permanent outposts and defenders that could serve as a stationary target for Hamas guerrillas operations, both in the Netzer corridor and in the Rafah area. The IDF estimates that Hamas is actually collapsing militarily, but it is still capable of conducting a guerrilla warfare. It has ceased to be a terrorist army with rockets that can reach the Israeli rear and with the ability to attack Israeli targets, and has returned to what it was in the early stages of the Second Intifada. Against the terrorist activity of Hamas, the IDF will set up a mobile operation, mainly above ground and mainly in places where the IDF estimates that there are no hostages. The security establishments believe that Hamas and Islamic Jihad indeed recently received an order to murder the Israeli hostages when the IDF forces approach them. Therefore, the IDF will maintain a pattern of operation to blockade Hamas above ground level to prevent it from rising above the ground and attack. The goal of this new strategy will be to tighten the military pressure on Sinwar so that he will go to the deal and without harming the hostages. This will replace the strategy of exerting heavy pressure both above and below the ground on Hamas, using pinpoint intelligence to strike where and when necessary without endangering the hostages. It is impossible to be more specific than this at this time. With that having been said, we can report to you that offensive operations against Hamas are ongoing. This includes attacks on Hamas positions on the air and on the ground forces. One such airstrike was carried out over the weekend on a Hamas position that had been set up in a compound that was previously used as a Halima Saadia school in the Gaza City area. The IDF spokesman clarified in his announcement that prior to the attack, many measures were carried out and taken to reduce the chance of harming civilians, including the use of precision weaponry, aerial contracts, and additional intelligence information. The terrorist organization Hamas systematically violates international law, brutally exploiting civilian institutions and the population as human shields for terrorist acts. The IDF will continue to act with strength and determination against the terrorist organizations that use the school and civilian institutions as a shelter. This principle was on display in the many other strikes that were carried out by the IDF on Hamas positions over the weekend, resulting in the elimination of 100 terrorists and the destruction of several bunkers, weapons storage depots, and tunnels. In the last 24 hours, the IDF allowed publication of the fact that Air Force helicopter gunships neutralized 2 battalion commanders of the Islamic Jihad on Tuesday at the direction of the Shin Bet, Amman, and the Southern Command in Gaza. The 2 were neutralized during an attack on a command and control compound that was disguised inside the humanitarian compound of Deir el-Balach and was used by terrorists from the terrorist organization Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on new developments in the battle against Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group in the Gaza Strip, so stay tuned to this YouTube channel, and if you want to receive real-time updates, you can visit our website at tbnisrael.com/news. You can also follow us on social media. Just click TBN Israel. Shifting our focus now to the northern border and the ongoing battle with Hezbollah. It was a busy weekend for the air defense units of the IDF and the civilian firefighting crews in the Galilee in the north of Israel. But it was also a very busy weekend for the Air Force, which strongly retaliated for the heavy barrages of rockets and missiles that Hezbollah fired into Israel with airstrikes on Hezbollah launchers and other positions. Sunday morning saw another heavy barrage of at least 50 rockets, and the border community of Kiryat Shmona suffered direct hits, causing damage to buildings and infrastructure. These heavy exchanges of fire came after a weekend that saw the Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdullah Bouah Habib tell the Al Jazeera network that Israel has sent messages to Lebanon through intermediaries saying it isn't interested in a ceasefire with Hezbollah, even if there is a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Be that as it may, it can be observed that the IDF has already begun the preparation phases of a large air and ground campaign in southern Lebanon. This follows the successes of the preemptive strike that the IDF landed on Hezbollah on August 25, which broke up Hezbollah's plans for a large-scale strike on Israel to avenge the assassination of their chief of staff, Fuad Shukar, in Beirut in July. Some new details of the preemptive strike are beginning to emerge, including the fact that, as previously assessed, hundreds of Hezbollah launchers with rockets loaded in them and aimed at Israel were destroyed in this strike. Many rockets, which were stacked up next to the launchers, ready to be reloaded and launched after the first salvo was away, were instead also destroyed in this strike. This action is assessed to have greatly reduced Hezbollah's ability to fire deep into Israel. In fact, the IDF has released an updated estimate that the strike destroyed almost 7,000 launcher tubes and nearly 20% of Hezbollah's short-range rockets. Several anti-aircraft systems were also put out of action, along with other military assets. However, despite the considerable damage it has sustained, Hezbollah is still very dangerous, and that is why the IDF is making precautionary preparations for a major campaign in southern Lebanon. The Air Force is setting the stage by systematically destroying Hezbollah's military assets in the area, starting with the rocket launchers and moving on to weapons depots and other military installations. The methods for finding these hidden launchers include constantly observing the area, so that when a rocket is fired from one area, that area is struck within minutes. There are many other ways that the IDF has to look for these launchers so that they can be destroyed. This is being done in an effort to reduce the amount of damage and disruption to Israel's home front if and when a ground maneuver into southern Lebanon becomes necessary. Another major threat Hezbollah poses is their increased use of UAVs, drones, which have a very different flight profile from rockets, which make them more difficult to intercept. But the IDF had made considerable progress on this issue over the past 10 months, and the number of UAVs being intercepted has risen dramatically. This leaves the threat of October 7th style attacks into northern Israeli communities by the Hezbollah Radwan commando forces. On the evening of October 7th, there were an estimated 2,400 Radwan forces positioned within striking distance of 3 communities on Israel's northern border. Another 500 operatives of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group were also sitting on that border, waiting for their opportunity to strike Israel. Today, the intelligence assessments are that there are only a few hundred of these operatives near the border, and most of them are at least 7 kilometers north. On Friday, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi visited the northern border and said, "The IDF is very focused on fighting Hezbollah. I think that the number of attacks in the last month, the terrorists who were killed, the rockets that were destroyed, the infrastructure that was destroyed is very large." Most analysts agree that it is all but inevitable that the northern front will soon become the main theater of operations for the IDF, although conditions are not optimal for an offensive at the moment. This is partly because the IDF has lost the element of strategic surprise. On the other hand, so has Hezbollah. So here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you about what is happening in the north. And this is a good place to remind you that over the weekend, we posted the latest episode of my series, My State, which included an in-depth report about the Hezbollah attack on the Druze village of Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights. The attack saw a Hezbollah missile hit a soccer field filled with Israeli children, killing 12 of them and wounding many other people. Despite their tragedy, the people of Majd al-Shams are standing strong, and I spoke with the mother of one of the murdered children who gave a moving and inspirational testimony. I also interviewed Adam Safadi, a Magen David Adom medic who cared for the wounded from the horrible attack, despite the fact that his own daughter was among those that were murdered. The sight of his child being one of those that were hit did not stop him, but rather he put aside his own pain long enough to provide life-saving care to others who needed his help. I have lived in Israel my whole life, and like everyone else here, I've developed a deep appreciation for Magen David Adom. The 35,000 volunteers of this organization have well-deserved reputation for selfless sacrifice, as they can always be counted on to put their own lives at risk to save others. The hurt and wounded from terrorist attacks, car accidents, and natural disasters can always count on Magen David Adom to be there to take care of them, bind up their wounds, and give them the best possible medical care, no matter who the victims are, whether they're Jewish, Arab, Christian, Muslim, Druze, or otherwise. Magen David Adom will be there in their time of trouble. But these volunteers are entirely dependent on donations to carry out their life-saving work. So if you want to help them, you can donate to them at www.cbn.org/donate. savinglivesisrael.com. Now back to the news, and we're switching our focus once again to the situation in Judea and Samaria. Intensive security operations were carried out over the weekend in the cities of Jenin, Tulkarem, and Farah, resulting in the elimination of 35 terrorists and the arrest of 45 suspects. Large quantities of weapons and ammunition were also confiscated, while 3 explosive-producing laboratories were found and demolished. In this context, we need to take a moment and go back to a document recently released on the Bild news portal in Germany. This document shows the methods that Hamas plans to use to rebuild its fighting force after the war. The document also reveals details about its tactics for prolonging the negotiations while using the hostage issue to deepen the pressure on Israel and manipulate the international community and the media. According to this evil plan, Hamas is disregarding the suffering of the ordinary people in Gaza and will continue to use the hostages as bargaining chips in their strategy against Israel. This will continue even if a ceasefire is reached. The document also gives details of the Hamas plan to manipulate the media and the international community, with Hamas planning to blame Israel for the failure of the negotiations, while claiming that Israel rejected a compromise proposal raised by the United States. The report in the Bild ran on Friday morning, but the document was drafted a few months ago in the spring of 2024. It was discovered on a computer that the IDF found among intelligence materials in Hamas tunnels. This computer is believed to have been the personal property of Hamas leader Yair Sinwar. I have a comment to make on all of this. The strategic goals of Hamas are coming into focus through the release of this information. Following the execution of 6 Israeli hostages last Sunday, it would appear that Hamas is trying to bring Israel's attacks against it to a halt before all the operational goals of the campaign are completed. Hamas is trying to break Israel's will to fight, since they know that this is their best chance to avoid being completely annihilated by the IDF on the battlefield. Hamas is actually trying to shift the center of gravity in this war from the battlefields of Gaza to the streets of Tel Aviv, where hundreds of thousands of Israelis are demonstrating against the government's policies and demanding that the government accept the terms offered by Hamas in exchange for the release of the hostages. In order to stoke these flames, Hamas is releasing images and videos of the hostages in increasingly desperate conditions. Sinwar spent many years studying Israeli society, and he understands us all too well. He knows how much we care about every Israeli, and he's using the hostages to maximum advantage. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on everything that is going on in Israel. So please continue to spread the truth, share our videos on YouTube, and follow us on social media. Take a minute and click the follow button, subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you will never miss an update. I need to tell you a few more things about the situation that we see developing here in the Middle East and the possible global implications. This will connect some of the trends and will show you why some analysts are darkly predicting that we may be on the brink of a third world war. The United States military is on high alert here in the Middle East and has been for most of the past month. That is because Iran's proxy groups are expanding their attacks on United States allies and interests in the region, and they're also expanding their weapons shipments to Russia in support of its war against Ukraine. European countries have long warned Iran that this is a red line, and they have prepared a comprehensive set of new sanctions against the regime in Tehran, especially its aviation industry. However, there is no expectation that the sanctions that were associated with Iran's nuclear weapons program, which were lifted after the JCPOA nuclear deal was signed in 2015, are set to be renewed. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian security official issued a direct threat to Iran, saying if citizens in Ukraine die from those missiles, Iran will pay a double price and the response will be severe. In that context, it's important to mention that the Russian military has been firing Iranian-manufactured drones at Ukraine for over a year now, but the Ukrainian air defense has had great successes in intercepting them. However, another player in this drama is Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who announced on Saturday that he's calling on all the countries and factions in the Muslim world to unite against Israel. He darkly warned that what he described as Israel's lust for expansion wouldn't stop in the Gaza Strip, but that Israel would soon try to take the territory of Lebanon, Syria, and even the Tigris and Euphrates Valley of central Iraq. He added that only Hamas is standing between Israel and this plan to conquer the entire region, and he urged other Muslim countries to unite in support of what he called the heroic resistance Hamas is making to this agenda. We have one more story to report, and it came in even as we were preparing to film this video on Sunday morning. 3 Israeli men were shot and killed on Sunday morning in a deadly terror attack at the Allenby Crossing, a key bridge between Israel and Jordan. The attacker, a Jordanian truck driver, used a concealed weapon to open fire at close range. Israeli forces quickly neutralized him, but the damage was already done. This attack comes at a tense time as Israel deals with escalating violence on multiple fronts. Security forces are sweeping the area, checking for explosives and additional attackers as roads in the Jordan Valley remain blocked off. This attack comes just a few days after 3 Israeli police officers were murdered in another attack at a road junction south of Jerusalem, and now this. Israel is on high alert as the threat of terrorism continues to loom. The hatred is increasing and the axis of evil is becoming clear. We, TBN Israel, will be here to inform you of every development, so please follow and share us. And most importantly, pray for the peace of Israel and the peace of the IDF soldiers. Pray for the peace of the abductees, for the hostages to be reunited and returned to their loved ones in Israel. Pray for all the civilians that are affected by this war. And the most important thing you can do, because this is a spiritual war, is to pray for God's intervention and for the peace of Jerusalem.